Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation about the news which are coming up to the Helidon 4. My name is Král and I work as a Helidon developer at Oracle. These are some channels how you can reach me out, so for example send me an email or reach me out over the Twitter if you'll have any questions and you would like to contact me directly. Alright, so in this presentation I have to include safe harbor here, so that means I can lie to you as much as I can, but I will try not to. Right, so quick introduction to what Helidon is for those among you who might not know. So Helidon is set of Java libraries for developing microservices, and if you'd like to get more information about the framework overall, about the documentation, examples and stuff like that, just take a look at helidon.io and you will find everything there. Helidon comes from the Greek word for swallow, so that's where this name came from. And also important to note that we are open source under Apache 2, and Helidon is small, fast, and definitely fun to use. Right, so Helidon in general is cloud native ready, and we are offering quite a lot of services for you to use and choose from. And the last, but definitely not least, Král VM native image. We are having full Král VM native image support. So now let's take a look into the two flavors which Helidon has as of version 3. We are having Helidon SE, which is based on the reactive paradigm. It's a non-blocking framework and it's very fast because of the reactiveness, if done properly, obviously. And it has a really tiny footprint and functional style of APIs. Also, Helidon SE do not contain any magical frameworks such as dependency injection or annotation processing and stuff like that. Basically, all you have to do yourself. On the other hand, we are also having Helidon MP. It's following the blocking paradigm, and it's based on microprofile and selected Jakarta EE components. Helidon MP is, let's say, slower than the Helidon MP, than the Helidon SE, but definitely not slow. It's fast as well. And it has a small footprint, but again, since we are providing quite a lot of libraries to be included into this, it's not as small as Helidon SE. Right, so what's coming in Helidon 4? Well, firstly, Helidon 4 will be based on Java 21. It is fully optimized for virtual threads, and we completely redesign Helidon SE to follow the blocking paradigm instead of the reactive one, because we really do believe that virtual threads are actually way to go. And with this updated Helidon SE, we have updated Helidon MP to have the best performance we could have. Right, so let's start with Helidon SE. And we will start with NEMA. NEMA is a microservice framework. It's built from ground up and designed for virtual threads. So this is really a new server. There is nothing like taken over from the previous version or some leftover codes which might slower the overall stuff or anything like that. This was really designed on the greenfield and with virtual threads in mind. We have developed the NEMA with the close collaboration with the JDK team, and the performance of the NEMA is actually is having the same performance as the reactive programming models with the simplicity of the blocking code. The core of the NEMA server is the web server, and we have included some additional APIs like observability, fault tolerance, and stuff like that. All right, now let's compare the reactive type of code with the imperative style. As you can see on the left side, there is this reactive paradigm where you are just executing GET request to some endpoint, and you are requesting the response to be handled as a JSON object. And these two lines are actually executed by the server thread, and then the server thread returns to the thread pool or event loop in terms of the netty to be reused by some other request. And those mapping operations you can see there are actually executed by the client thread once the client handles the response. As you can see, this can be pretty complicated. Reactive paradigm has tendency to getting you to callback hells and stuff like that, and that's definitely not optimal. So now let's take a look into the imperative type of code. As you can see, the basic API, the definition of the endpoint is the same in both cases, but the overall method body is completely different. Right now, we can just perform GET, we can request it to be handled as a JSON object, and then wait and block until the response is received. And once it's done, just say, okay, give me a status of it out of the JSON object we have received, and then send it to the original caller of this endpoint. And this is much simpler. This is simpler, readable, and easier to maintain, and definitely more friendly for junior developers to get into. Right, so now let's take a look into some performance graphs, because we had to do some performance measurements, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to say whether we are going the right direction, right? So these results are for NEMA at Alpha 6 release. This is currently the latest release in Maven, so if you would like to test it, just take a look into the Maven for this version. And as you can see, we are comparing NEMA with netty at let's say slightly older version, but nothing too serious, and with a really new one. So the first two columns, the blue one and the red one, are actually about the GET request, which were returning the serialized JSON. The reason for two actually is that we have selected different concurrency for each of these tests. And as you can see, it's pretty comparable to the netty itself. It's basically the same performance. Oh, by the way, one thing to note: this graph is having its performance measured by requests per second. Then there are two other columns: the yellow one and the green one, and these two are doing basically the same, but this time we are receiving just a simple plain text response without any JSON handling inside. Again, still basically the same performance as Netty itself. And the last three are doing the same as the previous test, but this time with pipelining enabled. So as you can see, it basically skyrocketed the performance just because we have enabled pipelining. It is apparent that Netty at the latest version, or one of the latest versions, kicked up the performance a bit. And that's great. We are actually pretty happy about it, because the competition is needed. It will accelerate the progress of NEMA and also the Netty. One thing to keep in mind, however, is that we are comparing a raw Netty handler with a full-featured web server. That's the NEMA. And the full-featured web server is having basically the same performance as the raw Netty handler here, just because we are using blocking paradigm with virtual threads. All right, so Helidon NEMA will be becoming a core part of Helidon SE. What that means? Well, we will be completely transforming Helidon SE to be blocking or imperative instead of reactive. We will try to keep as much as possible with the feature parity and API style with the previous server for our users to be able to migrate to the let's say new Helidon SE as simple as possible, because we do realize that this is tricky, because we are doing some backwards incompatible changes and basically changing the server which someone is already using. But I think that the overall migration process will not be exactly hard about that. All right, one great thing is actually that the Helidon SE previously didn't support any injection, but right now with NEMA, we are trying to provide as much comfortable approach for users as possible, and then brings me to introduction of Helidon injection. That's something we are bringing alongside of the NEMA, and its injection completely compile time, reflection free, and with minimal performance impact. What does that essentially means? That is that everything is handled during the compile time, and there is no reflection used during the runtime. And let's face it, reflection is not exactly the fastest thing you can do. So if you eliminate that, and you are having everything ready, and you'll just basically load a class, it will be fast as possible. So this is Helidon Inject in general. It offers deterministic, because we are right now not depending on any class path ordering or anything like that. We will just be able to analyze everything, all the dependencies, all the stuff, how the services should be injected, should be created, and stuff like that, at the compile time, we will generate for it the classes with Java docs, with complete codes and everything, and then just load it and create your services. It's based on JSR 340, and that means you can use the annotations you are used to. So, for example, singleton, provided, and basically all of these. Also, Helidon inject brings something we call config-driven scoped services. And what that essentially means, that you can include configuration of your services, and by the way, by those services I mean essentially the beans you know, for example, from CDI. You can include this config into our Helidon config and then just use Helidon injection with this config, and Helidon will configure all of your services based on the configuration. We will demonstrate that later. I have a demo here for it. There are also interceptors, which are basically the same thing as in terms of the CDI, where you had some around invoke and stuff like that, and it's basically that. Also, everything compile time. And important to note, Helidon injection is optional. So if you rather not use injection because, well, it's injection and some magic happening somewhere, well, you can freely skip that. You do not need to use it if you do not want to. And now, let's take a look into the injection sample I have created for you. For that, I will need to switch to the IDE I'm having here. All right, I'm glad it signed out. Come on, please. Work faster. Nice. Okay. One more time. Nice. Right. Finally. So now let's take a look into the code I have here ready for you. But as I can see, it's pretty hard to read, so let me increase the font size a bit. Okay. And right, so let's make it 20, let's say. And editor here, font. And again, for example, 20. It's more than enough. Right, let's start with the basic. So, if we will have some injection point and you would like to inject into it, right? That's like the most common case. So let's take a look here. We are having some, by the way, is it readable? I think it is, but, right? Good. All right, so as you can see, I am having here some class called cinema, and I have here an injection point called conference, right? This is some currently running conference inside of that cinema. And then I'm having here some method which prints out information about the conference, if there is any running. Then I am having some interface here called conference with the contract annotation, and that's essentially it. Then I'm having here also the concrete instance, that means JCON conference here, and which returns just the name of the conference, and that's basically it. Then I am having here the main method, which will allow me to execute a Helidon injection and check which which services I'm having, and basically go through everything. So now by the first line, we will go through all of the services we are having. We will load them from those sources we have created during the compile time. The second line is going through these found services and allowing us to find the service we are looking for. In my case, it will be cinema, because I want some service which contains something to be injected. And then with the get method, the resolution of this service will happen, and then we can freely use it. So let's try to run it. I don't know why I'm having a breakpoint here, but okay. And as you can see, it prints out that there is currently running conference in the cinema and that its name is JCON. That means the injection has been really properly resolved and that it works. That's the most important part. If anyone would be interested, what was actually generated, and that it really generates stuff and it's not using just the reflection approach, we can take a look here to the target. Okay, I close it, nice. Without mouse, I am like without hand. Okay. And these are the generated sources we have created for you during the compilation time, based on your annotations and the setup you have done. And I will just open this one, for example. As you can see, these are full Java sources. This is not something decompiled. These are real Java sources with Java docs everywhere. So if you will use this somewhere in your code, and I do not mean this particular class, I think you will not use it anywhere, but at least if you will be debugging or going through it, you will see what each method means, why it's there, and stuff like that. I will not be going deeply through this, but I wanted to give you basically brief example of it, how it looks like. So there is also no bytecode manipulation happening. Everything is really generated by the annotation processors. And now those config-driven services. We mentioned that, or I mentioned that during the introduction of the Helidon inject itself. So now let's take a look there. Okay, so again, we are having some, let's simplify this a bit. We are having some interface, again, conference, right? And then all we need to do is, if we want to create config-driven service, then we have to have a config for that particular object, and, well, in our case, some implementation of the conference here. So at the injection or at the creation time, there is a constructor which is annotated with the @inject, and it injects the config of the conference. And with this config, then we are able to work with somehow. And in our case, we are just printing out the name of the conference this config was bound to. So again, all we needed to do next is to have this config. As you can see, it's just a simple interface. We are not doing anything else. We are just saying, okay, so this is configuration for the conference, and there should be some name. And what Helidon inject will essentially do, it will generate the configuration for us, because this is just a holder for a data basically. And if I'll run it again, I hope I'm in a correct class, or I will rather do it this way. As you can see, basically the result I got is when I was selecting the first service available, it was JCON. But then I selected all the conferences, and there was some other conference also created. All right, how does the config look like for this? Because that's basically what this is all about. Well, simply like this. There is a conference key, which we have, which is taken from the name of the config, but you can freely change it if you want to. Then, basically, all these parts are separate configuration for those services, config-driven services. So this is one conference config, and this is the second one. This will create two instances of conference config, and then when creating this generic conference in our case, it will just inject each corresponding conference here, the config here, and that's the reason why we have created two. And you can do this basically for each type you can with as many as possible configuration options you like. It's just up to you. And also Helidon will be supporting that, so you'll be able to just create everything fully configurable over the config beans and stuff like that. And again, just a quick peek here into the generated sources. I should have taken the mouse. Okay, as you can see, this is the configuration implementation here. I didn't open it, but I don't know whether is my mouse. Yeah, it's my mouse visible. And yeah, basically all of these classes there for this injection purposes. So really, it's fast and it's very simple. If you need to debug the stuff, for example, find out what's happening there, why it's behaving certain way, and you are not sure, you can freely take a look here, even place a breakpoint there, and just simply debug the code as you would normally do with your application, and that really simplifies the stuff. Now the injection is not like a root word, and it's simple to use. Right, now let's get back to the presentation. All right. So the sample we have seen, and this is rather more internal stuff. But we are introducing also class model generator. It's mainly intended for those among you who might want to have their own annotation processors, and they want to simplify their work as much as possible when generating new classes, because that's usually what you want to do with it. So with this model, we can generate class based on created model of this class. We really try to, or we are trying, since this is as well in development, we are trying to basically model it for users, let's say, goddamn. For it to be as simple as possible to use. And we have included something we call automatic import handling. And that's used, for example, for the cases where you are adding a field with a certain type. You are having a method which returns some type. It's having parameters, again, with some types, and stuff like that. What will happen is we will collect all of these types, we will resolve those, and we will create automatic imports for you for all of these types. Well, okay, you might ask, what if you are having conflicting names? Well, then we are deciding on whether it's the same package or whether it's internal class of the class we are building, or, I mean, the conflict with, or stuff like that. And based on that, those imports are created, and full package name is either used or not in those conflicting cases. So everything like this is also covered. We are having smart body formatting. This is something we are still improving, but we are trying to make the method creation as simple as possible. And also generating of the Java doc, because, well, maintaining the Java doc, even in the generated class, could be a hassle and not very something you would like to do much often. So we are having automatic way of keeping it up to date. Now, right now, we are support only classes, but definitely other types will be included as well in the future. And this is just a simple example of how it works. So we are having some class model, which is basically like entry point, and we are having a builder method there. You will specify a package under which you would like this to be created, the name of the class, the description of the class, that means what this class is, and to make this a little bit more complex, I added a field there. So this field is of some test class. This is a class which is coming from a different package than this class is created. And we called it my test field, nothing too complex here. And as you can see, this is the result when you generate a class. It will take care of basically everything, and those descriptions parts are actually the Java docs you are having there. In terms of methods, for example, you can assign a description to each of your parameters, and then these descriptions, alongside with the names of the parameters, will be automatically included into the Java docs. So once you change it, it will automatically be changed in the generated code as well. So you do not need to do anything else other than that. Right. So that's in terms of the class model. And now let's take a look into some Helidon SE summary. So Helidon SE will be blocking. It no longer will be reactive, and we will be getting rid of all the netty dependencies we had so far. We are really trying to keep the feature parity with the Helidon SE 3, and the 3 is the version of the current release of Helidon. And to make this transition as simple as possible for our users. API design is very close to the current Helidon SE, so it will basically have all the methods which it had before, but this time without the reactive parts there. And also, we have introduced Helidon injection with a config-driven services because it can simplify quite a lot of stuff. So this was about Helidon SE. Now let's take a look at what's coming up in Helidon MP. Helidon MP will be based on Microprofile 6. So we are updating all of our specs, or Microprofile specs, which are bound to this corresponding version. Also, we are updating to Jakarta Core Profile 10, And we will be, as well as the SE, based on the Java 21. One of the, let's say, the most important change here, or one of the most important ones, is actually that we will be based on the NEMA instead of the previously reactive Helidon SE. And because of that, we are actually faster than before. And it's actually illustrated on this particular graph. So if you will take a look at the left side, there is measurement of the speed of Helidon MP based on the NEMA, that's the blue bar there. And with the Helidon SE as an underlying level, as you can see, it's nearly twice slower in comparison to Helidon NEMA. And the second example, or the performance measurement here, is when we used HTTP2 with TLS. With Helidon SE, or better to say maybe with Helidon MP, we have managed to quadruple the performance of the server, and that's pretty good. So now let's take a look into MicroProfile. MicroProfile is open source community specification for enterprise Java microservices. That's the definition of the MicroProfile itself. It's hosted at Eclipse Foundation, and it has participants among companies in the world, such as Oracle, IBM, Red Hat, and others. They are pretty high cadence. They are releasing quite often, like 4 releases a year. And if you'd like to know more about them, just head to their webpage, microprofile.io. All right, so since we are updating to MicroProfile 6, this illustrates the spec which needed to be updated. And we are updating, for example, OpenAPI. There were some addition of some support for Jakarta Bean validation annotation present in this particular version, and also definition of security requirements were approved at this, improved at this version. Then we are updating the metrics to version 5.0. And to be fair, metrics went through quite a lot of changes. So if you are using those, I would definitely recommend checking the changes in this particular version to have better understanding of what changed. Then also JWT authentication to version 2.1. There was some improved token age handling, and also decryption key algorithm, a new decryption key algorithm added among the supported ones. Then there is reactive streams operator at version 3.0 update, and reactive messaging to 3.0 as well. Also, we are deprecating support for open tracing, and instead we are introducing new implementation of telemetry at version 1.0. Then let's take a look into some Jakarta EE profile, core profile 10 updates. So we have updated the RESTful web services to 3.1 version. We have included CDI Lite at version 4. Then JSON-B at version 3. JSON processing at 2.1, and annotations at 2.1 as well. The blue ones are without a change, as with the previous example. And we are also having some selected Jakarta EE specifications present, such as persistence, transactions, or WebSockets, but we didn't do any updates there. Okay. So now let's take a look into how those two flavors will actually look like after the Helidon 4 release. So Helidon SE is changing to the imperative and blocking. All of its APIs will be optimized for Java virtual threads. It has an optional Helidon injection, and it has even smaller footprint. And the reason for that is that we were able to remove netty, for example, out of our code. Now we are having even less dependency on some third-party libraries. And Helidon MP will basically stay the same. If you have used Helidon MP until this point, there will be just mainly those specification updates for you and the performance increase. And that's good, I think. Yeah, so that's in terms of that. And when Helidon 4 is released, Helidon 4 is coming immediately after Java 21 release. We are really trying to do it at that time. And that's pretty much it from my side. Here are some links. You can follow us there. Feel free to reach out if you will have any question. For example, our Slack, we are monitoring it quite often, and we are providing guidance for the users which need help with something. And also on our helidon.io page, we are having a documentation there which describes how to do each part or how to use the technology we are having. Right, and that's basically it. Thank you. Right, maybe if you have any questions, I wasn't sure whether there will be any in terms of the news, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask those, or simply reach if you'll meet me somewhere or come here directly. That's fine.